Alrighty, chat, we've got a spicy one for you today. So, as we all know, dating, relationships, loneliness, isolation, mental health, all of these things are getting worse. And if you turn to this place called the internet, what you'll find is that there are a lot of contrary opinions. The one thing that we're all sure about is that we are right and everyone else is wrong. So we're going to take a look at a couple of tweets and try to figure out what on earth, from a psychiatric perspective, clinical perspective, human perspective, is going on right now. So here's the first one. Wow, it's bleak out there for some people. What happened to these guys? I can't remember the last time I talked to a girl that wasn't a coworker or just doing her job. The hardest decision of a man's life is choosing between the 6 out of 10 who loves you and the 9 out of 10 that you actually desire. If you told me COVID killed 80% of people under 30, I would believe you. They're in hiding. Food delivery destroyed their presence in public. I know 2 women. Talking to women is mental torture. I talked to my female cousins and aunt today. Literally same, bro. Real. I've never done it. I assume that they're talking about approaching women. So then this person, Fask, said they missed the last boat. Once a guy is out of college, he's more or less stuck with whatever his job and hobbies provide, which typically isn't much, and is walled off due to HR issues, even if there are women to chat with. I get that this boggles older guys' minds, but that's it. So this sort of started a really spicy Twitter exchange where a lot of men out there are sort of saying, like, it's very hard to talk to women, HR gets mentioned, and then there's all kinds of responses, okay? I'll beat this on a dead horse until the boomers and Gen X folks learn that the world they dated and married within is long gone. Dating is different. Socializing is different. Standards are different. Oh, and the boomers did no one any favors by being insufferably selfish too. A lot of guys decided very early on that they'd rather just be alone. It sucks and they know it feels sucky, but because they haven't learned what a relationship even is, it is easy for them to just not pursue one at all. Combo that with boomer divorce misery examples and voila, not quite sure what that's referring to. I find it hilarious that the lowest IQ people can't parse that I'm not talking about myself. I'm part of the older generation watching my sons navigate the stupidity that is currently mingling and dating. What worked for me doesn't exist any longer or is entirely online now. And so when this person posted this, people responded, right? So here's presumably a young man who kind of says, whenever I see posts like this, it's always a good reminder to me that the internet is not a good source of information. I'm a normal looking guy who works out sometimes, runs sometimes, and goes out semi-frequently. I meet and talk to women literally everywhere I go. Everywhere I go, such as church, bands, bars, hobbies. This is proving my point. If I were to suddenly find myself single and childless and used what you listed, and I'm in the suburbs of a big city, I'd have my pick of divorcee 40+ women to be sure, so my age group. If I were single, childless, 20-something, same pickings. So we're starting to see something a little bit different here. People are struggling to date. It appears to be that more men are struggling than women, and we'll get to some statistics about that in a second. And there seems to be like this really, really bizarre disconnect where some people are like, I haven't talked to a woman who is not a coworker or for a professional reason in years. And other people are like, it's just easy, bro. Just put yourself out there, right? I go to churches, I go to bands, I go to places, I learn how to socialize, and then it's like not that hard. And we see that it's not just one person who's saying this. Why don't people just go to a bar or a university club, events, whatever? I'm in NYC, so my perspective is skewed, but it appears that there are tons of beautiful single women everywhere. Hell, talk to someone on the street or train if you know how to do it. Okay, so like some people are like, okay, like I get that things are hard, but go and socialize. And then some people are also like a little bit more critical. Online most of their pubescent lives instead of interacting with society. Easy access to pornography, low testosterone, right? So a real science bro here. Average 18-year-old has the testosterone levels of a 65-year-old. This is unprecedented in society. There's a huge divergence in political leanings happening in that age group. That's certainly true. And then women are weighing in too. So do these guys just have no free will at all, completely at the mercy of their circumstances? And so this is kind of what we're starting to see in this trend where there's like a lot of people who are struggling to connect with other people. And they're getting all sorts of ranges of responses. The first is like, oh, it's actually not that hard. Just put yourself out there. The second is like, What's like, do you not have any free will? Oftentimes, like, people on the internet will blame them for being losers or whatever, like having low testosterone. And then we also have like women who are contributing. I don't know if this is a woman or not, but like people who are contributing in a more like potentially helpful way. If you have a genuine platonic friendship with women, they will try so hard to set you up. The problem is that these guys don't see women as people who they could be friends with, right? And that I think is like true, like the first part. So like, the women that I know who are in relationships love playing matchmaker. So I think that that could be a piece of the issue. But I think a huge problem here is that people are sort of making assumptions about other people's experiences. And so here's another take. It's very difficult to start a social life if you lose a social life. It kind of has to be continuously maintained. And when the pandemic broke that chain of continuous in-person gatherings, a lot of people just couldn't come back. And this, I think, really leads us to what I think is going on. And the answer may shock you, but what we're really seeing here and now play out in front of our eyes is natural selection. Adapt or die. Hey, y'all, if you're interested in applying some of the principles that we share to actually create change in your life, check out Dr. K's Guide to Mental Health. And so we start by understanding what literally is meditation. How does experience shape us as human beings? How do we strengthen the mind itself as an organ? And so by understanding our mind, we understand a very, very simple tool, a crucial tool that we have to learn how to use if we want to build the life that we want to. So check out the link in the bio and start your journey today. So what's actually going on here? Because if we look at Twitter, we see two groups of people who are sure they're right and 100% sure that the other group is wrong. Some people look at the world today and they say that dating, meeting people, boys, men have it really, really hard. It feels really, really impossible. And then there's another group of people who's just like, okay, it's not too hard for me. I just started going to church or going to hobby clubs. And by the way, man, do you not know how to think, or do you have no free will? Or are you just victims of your circumstances? So it's almost like we're living in two separate worlds, which I think is exactly what's going on. It's almost as if the advice that one group of people gives literally doesn't translate over into this other group of people. And both of these groups are really confused because one group is saying, hey, if you do XYZ, it's actually not too bad. The other group is saying, we did XYZ and it doesn't work at all. How can we explain this? So let's take a look at Darwin's finches, okay? So in the Galapagos Islands, Darwin went there back in like 1835, and he found that there were different finches with different kinds of beaks. And what he noticed is that each finch has a beak that is already adapted to a particular kind of food source. So some of the beaks are all about like cracking nuts, and they're very like short and hard and can create a strong kind of vice-like effect. And other beaks are small and sharp. They can kind of get underneath leaves or get inside little grooves to sort of get at bugs. So we have like the nut-cracking finches, and then we have the sharp-beaked bug-eating finches. And I imagine that if you put those finches on Twitter, and something happened where one of the groups of finches had no access to food. Let's say all the bugs on the island disappeared. I imagine you'd see exactly what we're seeing on Twitter right now. Because the group of finches that is able to eat nuts is like, I don't understand what the problem is. Just squeeze down harder and then you'll be able to find the nuts that you're looking for. But this other group of finches that does not have that kind of beak, the way that they were born, the way that they were raised, something about them in the modern environment which has changed is no longer suited for success. This is literally what natural selection is. Natural selection is usually not about adaptation in response to an environmental effect. It is usually what happens is when a natural selection event happens, the people who are already adapted survive, procreate, reproduce, and pass on their genes. Whereas the group of animals, plants, whatever, humans, who are not well adapted to the current circumstances, literally die out. That's what natural selection is. Survival of the fittest. Now, fittest doesn't mean the sexiest or the most ripped. Fittest really means, in Darwin's words, people who have, in this case, finches, who are well suited, fit their environment. And what we're witnessing right now is super scary because it is actually a mass extinction event. Sounds crazy, but this is literally what's going on. There are groups of people who will have no option to procreate. We're starting to see declining birth rates in places like South Korea. Fewer people across the globe in general are having kids, but then there is this particular group of people who has no option to reproduce. And now this is going to get a little bit crazy, but as a psychiatrist, I sometimes wonder, do our genes have some way of letting us know that we are not going to procreate? Is there some kind of genetic existential dread that you can subjectively experience? Do we have some kind of internal mechanism that your genes sort of know, like on a deep biological level, hey, we're not going to get passed on? And are our genes able to hit the panic button? And I imagine that if such a biological mechanism exists, I have no idea if it does or not, it would look like exactly what we're seeing. This existential level of panic of like, I have no ability to meet people, to procreate, to have children. My genes and my legacy is dying out. These are people who are not living for something anymore. They're just being slowly extinguished by life. And when I look at some of these posts on Twitter, that's kind of the sentiment that I get. I get the sense of a person who feels like they are dying out in real time. Now, the question becomes, what is this natural selection event? And I think what we're really looking at is COVID. And let me explain, okay? So I used to be someone who was like, if I was 18 years old today, if you took 18-year-old me and you stuck him in the internet today, I would undoubtedly be somewhere on the incel red pill kind of spectrum, okay? So like back then it was like pickup artist, and I was kind of into that a little bit, not so much. But I think that back when there were like losers like me who didn't know how to talk to girls, the world was a different place. The world necessitated some amount of physical contact, regular physical contact with potential mates. Even though I had social anxiety, even though I was an introvert, use whatever words you liked, the world that I lived in demanded that I run into women over and over and over again, socialize with them, learn to socialize with them. I joined a fraternity. You have in-person classes where you have lab partners. I do internships where there are boys and girls. I go to like various like fairs at college, whatever. By necessity, I'm required to interact with women. So in my case, I didn't know how to talk to girls. I sucked at it a lot, joined a frat, went to parties, did all kinds of stupid stuff. But over the next few years, through repeated exposure, I was forced to interact with women, which naturally reduces our anxiety through like some degree of exposure therapy, and I kind of ended up okay. But the world that we live in today, post-COVID, is actually really different. If you don't try really hard, you can absolutely live a life where you do not encounter men or women, right? So I can work from home, I can get grocery delivery. People don't really go to church anymore. We hang out on Discord instead. So the way my path to salvation was like I was forced into these social interactions and other people were forced into social interactions with me, whereas nowadays that's not the case at all. And what we're sort of seeing is the natural selection of COVID. There's a part of it that like many people on the planet died, which is an absolute tragedy. But I think we're seeing another level of real natural selection, not just life or death, but in the modern work from home, dating app-based environment, which people are more fitted to succeed. So in a dating app environment where I can swipe through 1,000 pictures of men or women, who do you think is going to float to the top? The top 1%, the top 10%. And that's what the stats on dating apps show, that the people who are very physically attractive are the ones who get all of the attention. Whereas in the world that I grew up in, there were not supermodels on Tinder that I was competing against. I was an ordinary guy in an introductory chemistry class with relatively ordinary people to hang out with and talk to. So this is what I think is really going on, is that there's a level of selection pressure of people who are well adapted to a post-COVID world and people who aren't. So let's take a look more specifically at what has literally changed scientifically in a post-COVID world. So the first thing that becomes really important is there's a great decline in adolescent risk behaviors. So we illustrate this behavioral shift by collating and presenting previously published data on smoking, alcohol use, cannabis use, early sexual initiation, and juvenile crime in Australia, England, the Netherlands, New Zealand, and the USA, okay? So this is a study that is looking at risky behaviors from adolescents. It's really cool because it's looking at a lot of different behaviors from a lot of different places. And what they basically find is that there is a overall decline in risk. And the thing that contributes to the risk the most is we find the unitary trend hypothesis has theoretical and empirical support, and there is international evidence that decreasing unstructured face-to-face time with friends is an underlying driver. So I want y'all to understand this. In the post-COVID world, we do not have unstructured face-to-face time. Even if we have face-to-face time, it is not unstructured, it's planned. Hey, do you want to go through the trouble of lifting yourself off of your ass, commuting to meet me? Because if there isn't, for nothing at all. No, of course not. What are we going to do? I don't know. It's unstructured. No one does that, right? The only reasons we get up off of our asses is if the dopamine that we get outside of these four walls is somehow guaranteed to be greater than the dopamine inside these four walls. Unstructured face-to-face time is absolutely gone. Now, as unstructured face-to-face time disappears, adolescence, and we all become risk averse. The more risk averse we become, the harder it is to take a chance and meet someone. Walk up to a girl or a guy, introduce yourself, and talk to them, right? It becomes really hard because dating, generally speaking, is risky. That's part of the reason that I think dating apps, in a sense, work really well. Let's say have a very high user base because they feel safe, right? So if I'm like taking a dump on my toilet and swiping left or right, like that doesn't cost me anything, at least in that moment. It'll cost me stuff over time. The rejection will pile up. It'll decay at my self-worth and all kinds of stuff. But in that moment, it feels very risk averse. The second thing is it appears that relationships have fundamentally changed post-COVID, okay? So this is a study of intimate relationships before and after COVID lockdown. So for both dating and married participants, scores on relationship satisfaction, love, intimacy, and passion were significantly lower post-lockdown compared with the pre-lockdown period, okay? So this becomes really important too. Because what this literally says, this study is just looking at relationship satisfaction, how much love people feel before lockdown and after lockdown. And married or dating people, they all feel less love and less satisfied. It's just one study, take it with a grain of salt, yada, yada, yada. But I think this mirrors what we're actually seeing, is that people, it's like harder to fall in love. It's harder to feel satisfied in your relationship right now. Now, this is also where we sort of get to natural selection, because there are some people who know how to avoid those situations, know how to create a deeper emotional bond. There are some people who, based on the way that they were raised and their attachment style, maybe they have a secure attachment style, so like their ability to navigate relationship difficulties is better from the get-go. And many people who struggle to navigate, okay, how do I fix a relationship if it's kind of meh, right? And right now we live in a society where if something is kind of meh, it's like, oh, you can just find 1,000 other people. So abandon this relationship. Don't try to fix it. Don't try to work on it. Just move on to the next thing. And I'm sure that y'all will see this, right? Which is like, if we live in a world where everyone is moving on to the better thing, the person who is very physically attractive and can rotate through relationships and has no trouble finding a partner will, like, that's the environment in which they succeed in. Does that kind of make sense? And so this kind of taps into some of this idea that we see a lot, like this sentiment, right? This angry incel sentiment. Oh my God, some guys get all the girls. Now, I don't think that that's like specifically true, but I think we are seeing some actually really scary evidence that they're not entirely wrong. And so there's also data that shows that fewer younger adults are having casual sex. Among young men, declines in drinking frequency, an increase in computer gaming, and the growing percentage who co-reside with their parents all contribute significantly to the decline in casual sex. Now, do we need a scientific paper to tell us this is true? So first of all, casual sex is going down, the number of virgins is increasing. And what are the reasons for that, right? So being at home playing video games contributes to that. Now we have alternatives. So back in my day, I know this was such a huge luxury, you could beat a game, right? So like I used to play Legend of Zelda #2. And like when I played Legend of Zelda #2, I played it and I was done and I then got bored of it. The games that we play today, you can never beat and never be done with. So we're sort of stuck at home a little bit more. 50% of people under the age of 30 now co-reside with their parents, right? And I don't know if y'all have experienced this or not, But like a huge part of when you're young and like thirsty and have, your early stage relationships is finding a private space in order to gauge in intimate relations. And so like, since we're all living at home with our parents now, it's like way harder to do. So I hope y'all understand like how important this is. This doesn't mean that there are some people who are losers and some people who are winners. What we're seeing is people who are very confused because one person is saying, hey, it's not that big of a deal. It's super easy to find people to date. And another person or have a relationship. And other people are saying it's hopeless. It feels impossible. Now, literally the statistic that I cited was, last time I checked, was 50% of people under the age of 30 are co-residing with their parents. Now, imagine how these two groups experience the world differently. When I'm 26 years old and I meet a girl at a party, if she's like, hey, can we go back to your place? And I say, I live with my parents, what do you think will happen? Versus if I'm in the 50% of people who are like, yeah, I have a place that's 15 minutes away. We can absolutely go and hang out there, right? Do you all see how one very simple detail, which no one in Twitter acknowledges, everyone who's like, do people have any free will? Do dudes have any free will? They don't acknowledge that there are very big fundamental differences for the way that we walk around and we exist in the world. And the last thing that we're going to talk about comes from a website called Date Psychology. I couldn't find any peer-reviewed sources on this. They post polls on Twitter and they just collect people's responses. So here's a key thing. Should you be afraid to approach? Okay. So this is asking women, when someone approached you, what did you do? And 18.2% of all women say that if someone approached them, they reported them to the authorities. And I think there was that weird comment about, that the person posted on Twitter where they're like, and then HR gets involved. So what's going on here? So I think this is another thing that I think is like really, really scary that we don't really acknowledge as much. So this is not peer-reviewed literature, but there is a 1 in 5 chance that if you're a dude who approaches a girl, that you will get reported to an authority of some kind. I think one of the things that's happened now in today's society is that if you're a dude and you approach a woman, there is apparently a 20% chance, right? Data's not perfect, but there is a 20% chance that you will get reported to the authorities. How would that affect your ability to approach people? Back in my day, that didn't happen very much, right? People like, I hit on 100 girls that over the course of 3 years, like didn't report me to the authorities at all. There's no like authority, like I'm at a party with someone. That's not the experience of people today. And I'm not saying that this is good or bad, right or wrong, that women shouldn't report people to authorities. I think this is where if you're not careful, you get down like this red pill rabbit hole of saying, this is bad, we should change things to the way that they used to be. I'm not saying that. Okay, so be very clear. What we do on this channel is try to, from a scientific or spiritual sense, understand what the hell is going on. Equip y'all with the knowledge to do the best to deal with the world that we live in. We don't say that this world is good or this world is bad. Our job is to tell you this world is different. Let us show you how so you can navigate it as best as possible. But this risk is incredibly real because we also live in a world today where it is not innocent until proven guilty. It is guilty when you're accused. And maybe after you prove your innocence, there's a decent chance that there's a certain amount of damage that is like done that people don't recover for. I've had plenty of patients, men and women both, that if they get accused of something in the workplace, that the reputational damage is so bad that even if they're cleared, people just treat them differently. People treat them differently from a psychological perspective, from a relationship perspective. Oftentimes they have to end up leaving the job or even the whole industry if it's a small industry. So this is what like makes it hard, right? So first of all, there's a higher risk today than I think there was 20 years ago. And we are all risk averse because when we have unstructured face-to-face time, our brain learns social interactions a little bit better, and we are more capable of taking risks. So the risks are actually harder or higher, and it is harder for us to actually take risks, which if you're someone who's trying to date in the world today, man or woman, I think that you'll find that both of those statements are true. And that even if you're a woman on Tinder and you get a bunch of attention, you still have to be super safe because there are predators out there. We're all becoming more risk averse as a society. Now the question becomes, okay, if this is true, what do we do about it? So let me start off by saying this is not a answer, right? I don't think that like what I'm about to say will fix all of your problems. I think it's way too complicated. But there are some evidence-based things that we know foster relationships in an organic way. So what I tried to do is I sort of looked at this and I noticed that, okay, unstructured face-to-face time is really what we're missing. We're losing our third spaces. People don't hang out anymore. So what I tried to ask myself is, what is the effect of unstructured FaceTime? Can we understand what that does? And can we duplicate it without just having a bunch of unstructured FaceTime? So that's what I'd love to share with y'all today. Okay. So the first thing is eye contact and affiliative signals. So this is going to sound kind of weird, but basically one of the things that we learn when we hang out with people is this escalation of affiliative signals. The way this happens, if y'all have done this, and if you've never done this, we're going to lay it out for you. Okay. So like when we go to a party, there's this series of affiliative signals. And what does that mean? So this is sort of means like, okay, so like if I go to a party and I look at a girl, right? Or so I see a girl that I like, I'm looking at her. And then she like looks at me and then I look away. And then later she's looking at me and I look at her and then she looks away. There's this whole dance that begins before I start asking someone out. This is what eye contact and affiliative signals are. If you look at the way that human beings interact with each other, they have an escalating level of engagement before we even talk. So the next time then what happens is I look at the girl, then she looks at me, and then I smile at her. I don't look away, right? And I'll like raise my drink. I'll be like, here's to you. And then she maybe smiles, maybe she laughs. And then what happens is like maybe she goes like this too. And then I'm like, this is like kind of like flirting, right? So when we talk about unstructured FaceTime, there is a series of like, is this okay kind of signals. And you kind of slowly escalate, you make eye contact, you raise your glass, like whatever. And then what happens is like you walk over to them and then you introduce yourself. Hi, my name is Alok. I noticed that we were playing eye tag for a little while. I figured I'd just walk up and introduce myself because, hey, you're gorgeous. So like, does that kind of make sense? Like you kind of have this escalating thing. And I think that if you're trying to figure out who to ask out or who not to ask out, what I'll find when I work with my patients is that the ones that don't know how to do this basically strike out time and time and time again. Because then they mechanically go to one person. They're like, hello, my name is Alok. I enjoy this, this, and this. Will you go on a date with me? I was told to shoot my shot. So here I am shooting my shot. I make my intentions clear and known, right? That doesn't work. So if y'all aren't doing this, this is a skill that you should practice. And I strongly recommend starting with people that you feel safe with. That doesn't have to be sexual, right? So like when I'm walking down the street, I will give dudes the bro nod. So even when I'm like at a coffee shop or something like that, I will like raise my cup in salute to a fellow man as like man pride. I see you, man, and I raise my cup. A salute to you for being a good human being. I also make small talk in elevators. So I think there are lots of ways that you can build this, but this is a core component. It is an empathic connection that begins and forms before you even talk to the person, okay? So you gotta play with affiliative signals. Second thing is we wanna ask people out where there is a safe environment. So if we look at what makes someone feel threatened, right? Because we don't wanna be part of that 20% that gets reported to HR. So that 20% usually makes people feel unsafe. So anytime you're trying to deal with someone in a romantic way, safety becomes incredibly important, okay? Unless they're traumatized or have a fetish or whatever, okay? But basically, safety becomes important. So you want to be in a place that is well populated, well lit, where there is an easy chance of escape, and that things are not going to be awkward the next day, right? So awkwardness is going to be like some amount of not feeling safe. So generally speaking, this means that like if I can approach a girl at a party, let's say, this is a place where she's there once, I'm there once. The party doesn't happen every single week. It's a party that someone is throwing. So there's a lot of people around. Hopefully it's well lit, right? I don't want to like corner her like in a dark closet where nobody else is. I want to be in a place where there are lots of other people, in a place that if she decides she does not want to hang out with me, does not want to talk to me, she can escape very easily. She can lose herself in the crowd, and it is very easy to avoid me for the rest of the night. This is why we do not recommend that you ask people out who are coworkers or things like that, because if you're in a place where you're forced to see them over and over and over again, that can make things feel very awkward, maybe feel unsafe, and get you reported. So if you are in a class with someone or something like that, what I'd recommend, the way that I'd sort of would counsel people right? Not that I'm recommending this, but if you want to ask someone out who you're in a class with, do it after the class is over or when the class is ending. Hey, I've loved to get to know you over the last 3 months. You know, I got to say, I don't love calculus, but honestly, like, you being in the class makes it bearable. So thank you so much for making my class bearable. I would love to call you sometime, you know, and if not, like, no biggie, I will see you around. Good luck with the rest of your life. So you want to give people a chance to exit. That helps people feel safe. And if they feel safe, they will be positively disposed towards you. Okay. This is also why we don't want to ask people out like at places like the gym, because if they're like in a place where they go to regularly over and over and over and over and over again, and we ask them out, we can make things awkward. There's some techniques, some secret jutsus that you can do to sort of make that work. I guess I'll tell you all right now, right? So the way that you want to ask people out is like, you want to be very clear. And even if you're asking someone at the gym, hey, I've seen you at the gym for a few months. I was wondering if you want to grab a protein shake or something like that. And by the way, like, you know, if I've made things awkward, I apologize. I will never approach you again. Okay. So like, you can just let them know like, hey, I know this is making things awkward, but I just love to hang out. And if you don't want to, like, I won't bother you ever again. Be very clear with them. Okay. And then respect that boundary. Don't keep on circling back over and over again. And then y'all may be wondering, well, hold on a second, because if we look at data, we find that many people do start relationships at work. So how do you navigate that? On the one hand, don't date people at work. On the other hand, many people end up finding their partner at work. How does that work? This is the importance of the affiliative signals, right? So the way that you know whether it is okay to ask someone out or not is the kind of like flirtatious dance that you do. Y'all are staying up late, y'all are both working on a project, and it's like, you know, like, hey, like, you know, oh, like, yeah, it's 4 a.m., work starts in 4 hours, you live an hour away, like, you can come crash at my place. And then she's like, ha, 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 I wouldn't do that. And then you'd be like, I'd be the perfect gentleman, unless you don't want me to be, right? Like, bam, right? So this is, you know, don't do. This is what I mean. It's like you got to like flirt your way up to that. And that's how you sort of, that's how these work relationships develop. I wouldn't recommend it because it's, generally speaking, more bad than good. Next thing that's really important is a relaxed demeanor. So we want to be relaxed and easygoing. Oftentimes the reason that we struggle to ask people out is because we're like either angry, right? I'm angry at the women. The women are not letting me procreate. Man, they're not letting me procreate. My genes are dying out. Like, even if that's true, you can't be bringing that energy to them when you ask them out on a date. So we want to be relaxed. This is where confidence comes in. Everyone says, oh, like, you should be confident. We have a whole video about how to develop charisma as an introvert. Highly recommend y'all check that out because that has a lot more skills about like what is charisma and literally how to create it. But a confident manner activates their empathic circuitry in a very positive way, okay? So if you're anxious, if you're depressed, if you're angry, then the chances that you receive a negative response are super high. And this can quickly become a cycle because I'm angry, I'm resentful, I'm a loser, no one would ever date me, and I ask the first person out, I get rejected. Ask the second person out, get rejected. Feel more like a loser, ask the third person out, get rejected. So it keeps going. The last thing that becomes really important is shared context. So if you look at like how relationships develop, people who have some kind of contextual framework that they share can form bonds more easily. This is why, like, you know, this is why work is a common place for people to meet because we have the same asshole boss. So we're kind of in it together. Classes, oh, we both have finals. Like, we both have this final exam. Like, let's get together and study. There's some kind of shared context. So the way that I like to create this context, if you don't have it, if you're not in class with someone, if you don't work with someone, is this is where warm intros really, really matter. And this is where, like, when dudes say, or women say, like, oh, men and women can't be friends, I think one of the best ways to find a romantic partner is to have a lot of platonic relationships with people of the gender that you are attracted to. And then what we want to do is kind of recruit them, right? So this is where like a warm introduction is really important for creating shared context. If I walk up to a girl who's never seen me before and say, hi, my name is Alok, there's all kinds of question marks in the air. Maybe we did the flirtation dance and the eye contact dance and the winking dance ahead of time. Maybe we didn't. But what's way easier is if I have a friend who introduces me to the girl that I'm interested in talking to and says, hey, this is my buddy Alok. He's a psychiatrist who streams on the internet. That in and of itself, do y'all see, like, for those of y'all that struggle to meet people, do you see like how much easier that makes things? I'm not saying it's easy at that point, But a warm introduction creates this sense of shared context, and we know from a research perspective that shared context facilitates bonds. Now, I'm not saying that these 4 things will be sufficient to solve this problem, because what we're dealing with is a mass extinction event happening in real time. At the same time, what is our job here? Because some people have said, oh, Dr. K should stay in his lane, he shouldn't talk about dating, which is like, fair enough. I'm a psychiatrist, I'm not a dating coach. But what I consider my lane and what we're trying to do here is equip y'all with an understanding of what the hell is going on so that you can better navigate it. This isn't going to fix all your problems, but it's definitely a start. Let's say I meet someone, I'm at a party. Yeah, yes, we can level up later. I'm working. Okay, can you turn down the air conditioner a little bit, Avi? Thank you. The result of me succeeding in walking up to girls and talking to them. Okay.